And I think if I was to tell any advice to any entrepreneur in hard times, just realize that nobody can take your dream away from you unless you allow them to. There is no such thing as failure unless you allow yourself to fail, unless you quit. Quitting is the only way to fail.
Welcome back to Ignition Point, the channel for entrepreneurs. I'm Debbie Hart.
Sean Finnegan.
And today we have the Chris Naugle, the world's #1 money expert.
So I'm good friends with Chris. We go way back. At one point in his life, he was a professional snowboarder. So he's one of the favorite things I like to do with him is we go hit the mountain. We just got off the mountain in Brighton this morning. His first run down, he hits a big rail and then splat.
And he's still going to show up and film the podcast and do an event today and all day tomorrow.
He's such an amazing, and a couple of years ago you did a big launch, and I've never seen anyone work like you worked, between the BYOB, the Private Money Club, seeing you hit the road. You were on, I don't know how many news stations Chris was on, but it was every time I looked, you were in a new state, a new place, on a new channel, launching your programs. It's just amazing. I mean, you go live so often. You give so much incredible content. So it's an absolute honor to have you.
Thank you.
It is actually.
Honor to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
You do teach a lot of good concepts, and you give your content out so generously. But where did it all start for you?
Well, I mean, it all started just as a young kid. I was working for a restaurant at 16, and I was treated really badly. So you can only get pushed so far. I was physically and mentally just exhausted of this place, and the one day I went in, I quit. But my mom would be upset if I just quit a job, so I remember I came up with this idea: Mom, I'm gonna create a clothing line called Fat Clothing Company, PHAT. I'm gonna print shirts with my art teacher, Mr. Mahalski, and that was my plan. And that's exactly what I did. I came home, told Mom I quit my first real job, and then I started that clothing line in the basement. And that clothing line spun off, and it spun into a clothing store, which my mom is the only reason that store ever existed, because I was 17, and everybody shut me down. Every single person said, it's kind of like, kid, you'll shoot your eye out, right? But my mom saw that I was going to give up on the dream, and she ended up putting the only thing she had in the world, which was her house, up as for collateral so that I could get that SBA-backed loan. And Fat Man Board Shops became reality in November of 1994, dating myself.
You opened up a store.
Skateboard, snowboard shops where I sold my clothing line, and then I eventually expanded into lots of other clothing lines. Yeah. So that's where it all began, the entrepreneurial journey. Yeah.
Shout out to Mom.
Yeah,
Plus,
Mom.
You were doing something you absolutely loved. You became a professional snowboarder.
Well, the snowboarding is kind of what led me there, because like working that job, I couldn't go to the hill. They always wanted me to work weekends, right? Restaurants are busy on weekends, and I'm like, that's my snowboard time. That's when competitions are. So there was a big conflict there. So I remember the clothing owner is going to give me the freedom to go ride when I wanted, and I just took my clothing on the road with me, and I would sell it to stores on the way to the different contests. So I would first do consignment, then I started wholesaling, but then I was in this one store, and this is a key point. The guy's name was Tim. He owned a shop called Hardpacked. I'm in selling him my stuff, and after we're done, he's like, hey, do you want to go riding? And I remember I looked at my watch, and I'm like, what time do you guys close? And he's like, well, we close at 5. And I'm like, I got to get on the road. He's like, no, we'll go right now. I'm like, wait a second, you could just close? You could just shut the door and we
I didn't know this was something you could do.
So I'm just like, all right, let's go ride. So we did. Now, obviously, right then and there, I'm like, clothing line on the road, I just need a shop. And that's where the idea began. And I spent 6 months writing the business plan and getting shut down by everybody, having my father. I was 17 at this point. Because remember, I had the clothing line at 16. That transitioned into this idea for Fat Man. And Fat Clothing just became Fat Man. It was Fat Clothing, plus I was the man. And anyway, that's where it all began.
So you began your entrepreneurial journey as a teenager, wanting time on the hill to snowboard. I love that. But how did that journey lead you into finance?
And what were maybe some hard lessons as you learned along the way between opening up your shop and then transitioning?
Oh, yeah, so many.
Every lesson was hard. Are you kidding me? I remember.
They all are.
Listen, I mean, I was 17. I had a giant loan. Well, back then it was giant. It was $75,000 loan.
So I mean, dude,
my
17,
mom's
that
house
could have been like $7 million.
Exactly, and we're talking the 90s,
a lot
right?
Of pressure for a 17-year-old.
So the struggles were like there was times when business was slow, and I literally would be sitting in the back room on the cardboard boxes, just saying, I don't know how I'm going to make it, tomorrow. I don't know how I'm going to pay rent. I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage. Right. So everything was a struggle. I was learning as I went. I had to learn bookkeeping. I had to become a business owner when all I really wanted to do was just have this cool shop and go snowboarding. So the whole thing was a struggle, and I'll never forget when we paid that loan off. I threw this huge party at my mom's house. Cops came, almost went to jail, but anyway, that's for another day.
Worth it. Yeah.
Don't try that at home, kids.
So how did I transition into money? That's always an interesting one. So I had the shops going. I was literally living a dream. I mean, like if you ever can picture just living in a dream that you had, that's what I was living.
Yeah.
I was pro snowboarder, running skateboard, snowboard shops. I had 3 locations. Like life was good. And then some people will be too young to remember this, but the dot-com crash hit, and my business literally tanked. And I didn't know how I was going to make ends meet.
All disposable income kind of started evaporating in America.
That was my only income.
Yeah.
I mean, I had income from snowboarding, but it just was enough just to pay for snowboarding. And then my shops just tanked, and I didn't know how I was going to continue. So I did what everybody would do. I just put a resume out. My resume was so impressive that it fit on one piece of paper. Chris Naugle, had some, little bit of college, self-employed entrepreneur, skateboard and snowboard shop, and I'm the man.
Unemployable.
Unemployable. So nobody called me about it, but then I started I got 2 inquiries from Wall Street firms, like investment advisory firms. And I was thinking, what the heck does Wall Street want to do with a punk snowboard kid like me? But hey, I needed a job. So grandma got me my very first suit, taught me how to do a zip-up tie, because I didn't know how to tie a tie. And I went for the interview, and I remember the guy, he must have watched Boiler Room, because he slid the keys to, I think it was his Porsche, across the table. He said, kid, if you work at this firm, you'll have one of those. I'm like, where do I sign? That was it was 2003 is when I actually got kicked off, and I entered Wall Street. And I entered Wall Street while still being a pro snowboarder, still running my shops. But a key thing, and this is something I think one of the biggest takeaways that I ever could go back to that, this move, which was kind of forced on me, but it also forced me to work on the business, not in the business. Because up to that point, I was in the store working in the business every day. I was the business. So now I couldn't be in the store, so I had to promote my guys. And then I went out and I was working in Wall Street 9 to 5. Actually, it was like 9 to 9. But anyway, like my guys started running the shop and started doing better.
But you had to work a lot smarter.
Yeah, I had to work on
because you were forced to.
And this is when I started learning marketing, and I started working on like events and promoting and building the brand. Up to that point, I was just in the shop selling things, and now all of a sudden I'm like, I got this brand. Let's build this brand. Let's build a skate team and a snowboard team, and it was the most miraculous thing because it could have never happened without that one event. And that one event literally taught me how to be an entrepreneur. One that actually was working on a business.
What a wild transition to go from the board shop
to Wall Street.
To Wall Street.
It gets crazier.
About changing gears. You got your zip on tie. Wow. So what next? What happened next?
So I was doing that. I ended up selling this is a really hard point in time. So everything was going good there, but then I decided I was going to buy a strip mall. I was going to develop it into a 3-unit strip mall center where my store was going to move because we were paying a lot in rent. My rent went up. So I was going to move my store over there and I was going to rent the other 2 units and they were going to pay for the mortgage. So I bought this building, and just so you know in relevance of when, it was 2008.
Very significant year.
Before the Great Recession hit. So
this is like you went through the bubble, and then you go hit 2008.
I had just gotten back on my feet, and then all of a sudden, I remember it. I remember it vividly. It was almost Christmas time. I remember seeing changes, and I was in Wall Street, so I saw some things. But then all of a sudden, it just hit, and the strip mall wasn't done. I was borrowing money from hard money lenders, bad people. They were really bad people, and I ran out of money. I was broke as a joke, and I remember I had to decide, am I going to foreclose on this and lose everything? And I had just moved my girlfriend, and actually Larissa, my wife now, she had just moved into my house. And I remember one night, late at night, I had nowhere else to go, and I came home and I said, Larissa, can I talk to you? And I sat her down and I said, sweetie, I need your help. I need your help paying the mortgage. I need your help paying the utilities. And I need your help just making it through this time, because otherwise I'm going to go bankrupt and I'm going to lose everything. Now, she had just moved into my house. So just imagine that. Like, looking back, I'm just like, why did she even stick around?
Right.
But she did. She stuck with me. She did.
You knew that she was the right one.
Yeah, she was a champ. We moved a couple friends into my house to help pay the mortgage. And I mean, it was a crazy period of time, a really hard period of time, but we made it through 2008 without going bankrupt. And then after that, nothing really got better because the stores were really hurting at that point, and I just didn't have it in me to do the advisory, the snowboarding, and the stores, so something had to give, so I sold the stores in 2010. They're still open today.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty cool legacy.
Yeah.
How do you
it
feel
is.
like that experience shaped you in your career and what you're doing in your business now?
Well, every time you fall into those dark places, because I was in a dark place, and it just got darker and darker too, you start really just wanting to give up on yourself. And, you have those talks with yourself, like talks of doing dumb things, like should I just jerk the wheel of the car and just see if that tree can take me home? Or, I had so many dark thoughts. I was probably depressed. And I think the most important takeaway on that is the fact that when I hit the bottom, and I don't know if that was the true bottom, but I felt like it was the bottom, I had nowhere to go but up. And at that point, I started realizing that everything that happened to me was to teach me lessons. So the lessons I learned during the dot-com crash, the Great Recession, and I lost it all again in 14, which we might not have time to get into, but I'll tell it again in another podcast. But all those, when I hit my knees and I was down, I mean, number one, lots of praying, late at night, saying, please show me the way. But not only that, just you start to see why you're in that place and you start reflecting on that. And I think that was some of the biggest lessons I took away from that. But yeah, no, there was very hard times.
So when an entrepreneur is in a space like that and they're facing those thoughts of giving up and quitting on their dreams or continuing on, what advice would you give them?
When they're in that moment, there's no advice that's going to help them outside of this too shall pass. That would be the only advice. And I would tell them to always stay focused on their dream and don't listen to anybody. That's when you're down in your lowest points, everybody wants to give you advice. And my mom was always saying, why can't you just be normal? Why can't enough be enough? Because I was making good money in Wall Street. Why can't you do this? Just be normal. Just go get a job and it'll be fine. Everybody wants you to conform to their failed realities, their failed dreams. And I think if I was to tell any advice to any entrepreneur in hard times, just realize that nobody can take your dream away from you unless you allow them to. And there is no such thing as failure unless you allow yourself to fail, unless you quit. Quitting is the only way to fail.
Yep, agreed.
Yeah, our buddy Jeff Griffin spoke at Ignition Point Live last week, and he talked about rock bottom. A lot of times it is a hard, great foundation.
Yeah.
So that's a hard rock that you hit, but it's also a foundation that can create something great for you in the future. And I think if we were to really dig down and find out what entrepreneurs go through, a lot of times they have those rock bottom moments, and it gives you enough motivation to go out and springboard and go harder at it.
I think the one thing, like you follow social media and a lot of people are looking at all these entrepreneurs, they got the fancy cars, fancy houses, oh, I'm a millionaire. But they don't understand
what it took
being
to
an
get
entrepreneur,
there.
owning businesses is freaking hard. It
Yeah.
sucks. Like it's not some fairy tale thing. It is hard every single day. You're the first there, the last to leave, and you're the one that deals with every problem. So if anyone wants to become an entrepreneur just because they think it's easy and it's cool, it's exactly the opposite. But it is everything. It is everything you have ever dreamed of having. But it is
if you pay the
hardest
price.
freaking thing you'll ever do in your life.
If you pay that price to get there.
The price
and that is why
never,
we tell those
yeah.
stories, because they have to know what's coming, not to scare them away, but to empower them to get through it. That's why we also ask, how did you get through that?
Like I said, a lot of praying.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. A lot of praying, and I had a couple
Inspiration,
key
resilience.
people in my life that wouldn't allow me to fail.
Key people and your own determination not to give up when it was hard, no matter what, because you knew you wanted this life for yourself.
I didn't want to, no disrespect to my dad, but I didn't want to live
Yeah.
my dad's life. I didn't want to live the life my mom lived.
You
I didn't want to grow up and have kids and say, shut the door, we're not heating the outside, or all those things I grew up with.
Or someone telling you couldn't be home with them on the weekends, or you couldn't show up to their soccer tournament at 4 o'clock because you don't get off till 6.
When I was really young, I planted an idea in my mind, and I'm a dreamer, a visionary, and I just never, ever allowed that fire to go out. And when I accomplished one goal or one business or one success, I was always like the journey's just beginning, because I never arrive. I will never arrive. I'll never be satisfied. And people are like, oh, that's greed. No. I'll never arrive, and I'll never make enough money because there's too many other people that need help.
Exactly. It's not greed. You have more to give the world.
You're
You have
blessing
more
a lot of lives and
inside.
families.
Yeah, you are. So can we talk about that then, managing multiple businesses at the same time?
I think there's
Tell us about
17 now.
BYOB too. You got the hat.
17.
Yeah, so let me kind of fast forward. We're going to miss a lot here, but like this company here, Money School, BYOB. So I had an education company where we taught people how to flip houses. This is when me and my wife were we had a TV show on HGTV. I mean, whatever, it was 2018 called Risky Builders. You guys can Google it. But after that TV show didn't go on to series, what I had to do was pivot. And I had to figure out what I was going to do when I grew up. So I had this idea to teach people money because I had left Wall Street, because when I got the show, I had to retire from Wall Street and sold my practice. So that was the end of Wall Street, 2018. But we had the show. And I was gonna ride off into the sunset with this show until HGTV was bought by Discovery, shut the door, and that was it. So now what, right? One door closes, another opens. And I got the idea from Money School, and I wanted to go out and I wanted to teach people the truth about money. I wanted to teach them everything that I always felt was wrong about Wall Street, which was giving control of your money away. I wanted to teach people how to take back control of their money. And an interesting thing, I was actually out here snowboarding, and this guy, Mike, who you know well, used to lend me a lot of money. And I had a deal, and I met him at Cheesecake Factory. And I remember asking Mike when he was talking about the deal, I said, so Mike, how do you lend all this money? Because I knew it was better than what I was doing, because he didn't really work all that hard. And he said, well, I lend from my own private bank. And I'm like, dude, Mike, you got a bank, dude. You got yourself a bank. Like, why are we at Cheesecake Factory? Let's go to your bank.
You have arrived. You made it.
Go make a withdrawal.
And then Mike tells me, he said, no, I don't have a bank. I learned how to mimic a bank. I learned how to create a private banking system. And so he goes on with this. He tells me all the things. Now remember, I'm a financial advisor at this point, so I think I know everything about finance, right? Everything that there is, I know it. I have to. I've been doing this 14 years at this point. And he starts telling me all the stuff. You know, my private bank pays me a guaranteed interest rate for the rest of my life. It pays me dividends. The interest and dividends are tax-free. And I'm thinking in my mind as he's saying this, I'm like, what the heck is this? And then he says, Chris, when you come to me with a deal, I take a loan from my private bank and I give that money to you. But my money never leaves the account, which means my money continues to earn compounding interest even when I give you the money. And then what do, Chris? I said, well, I make payments to you. And he said, how much interest do you pay me? I said, 15%, which we got to talk about that. And so he says, Chris, my private banking system has taught me how to make money twice on the same dollar. And I'm like, what?
Your head at this point is
I'm just like
spinning.
Yes.
What do I not know that these wealthy individuals know? And he goes on and tells me what it is and how it works. And I said, Mike, you got to help me set this up. And he says, I can't. You got to talk to this guy, Brent. So I talked to Brent, and Brent said, have you watched the 90-minute video, which is the same 90-minute video on my website and the same 90-minute video I make everybody else watch. So I said, okay. I watched the video, and I don't know how to explain it. It was 90 minutes, which sounds like a long time. But it went by like it was 5 minutes. I had 4 pages of notes, and I swear it's the closest thing that I've ever come to literally seeing the truth of everything I wanted. And when I watched that video, I set up my private banking system. I started doing it, and then I was having Brent come out, teaching all my people for the real estate stuff, and then I'm in the back reciting what he's saying. And then all of a sudden, I started doing it myself. I started teaching banking.
Wow.
And that led me to today. We've got 9,000 clients.
Wow.
And 17 different businesses you're running.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story. They seem to multiply somehow.
Yeah.
And also I think your why is like there's a big famine of information about money. There's
We're
not taught it.
Yeah, we're not taught. It's such an important part of our lives, but it's not in our school system. It's not anywhere else. And so you're solving that problem and actually teaching people the true meaning of money and how it works.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I got a 3.5-year-old, my daughter, Vivi. And I always tell people, I say, my daughter, when she gets older, will not understand how or why her peers do what they do with money. It will be so foreign to her what they do and how they go to a bank and give the bank all their money and then go back to the bank and borrow money from the bank at a higher interest rate. That will be such a foreign thing because all she'll know is how to be her own bank and how to run her own banking system. And it will be very difficult for her. And I did a TEDx talk about this. But that's the truth. People need to learn how money works and the truth about it because you're not going to learn it from Wall Street. You're not going to learn it from an advisor. Schools are never going to teach you that. That would take control away from the banks and the Fed. And, well, we don't want to do that.
Watch that TED Talk, by the way.
Yeah.
It's so excellent. Amazing.
What's the name of your TED Talk?
Rethink Money.
Rethink Money. That's
Rethink Money,
really,
a letter
really
to
good.
my daughter.
All right, closing remarks. It's been an absolute, amazing to hear your journey and what you've done. So
And the journey's just beginning.
it is, and there's so much more. Like we literally were on the mountain today and talking about your future plans.
Private
I'm
Money Club.
super excited about that.
Is that the
The dating site for money.
dating
People with
site for
money
money.
meet people that need money and
Yes.
bring them together and it's
Brilliant.
just like a dating site.
I've seen you on many news stations talking about that concept, and it's so great. Within 5 seconds, people just get it.
Yeah.
When you describe it that way.
There's 2 problems in the world. People that have money want to make more, and people that need money to make money. So why isn't there
Bring
one
them
place
together.
where those people come together? I just created it.
There you go.
Hey, that is beautiful.
Solving problems.
So parting remarks, what would you say your best advice is for entrepreneurs that are watching the show?
Well, it's more of a quote. It's a quote from Will Rogers. And Will Rogers said this. He said, the biggest problem in America is not what people don't know. He said the biggest problem is what people think that they know that just ain't. So be careful who you take advice from. Be careful who you follow, because they may not be the ones that are giving the advice you need to chase your dreams.
So good. So good. Where can everybody follow you?
It's easy. On social media, everywhere. Just the Chris Naugle on all social channels. YouTube's my favorite, or my website, chrisnaugle.com.
He leads with value, so watch this channel. Does lots of lives, takes live questions from the audience on a regular basis. So follow this man.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.